As with the previous sequel, there is also a 100-year time skip between the last X game and the first game of the Mega Man Zero series.
This is where things get interesting. Did you know that Inafune actually wanted Zero to be the main character after Mega Man Classic? When he was asked to design a new protagonist, he originally came up with Zero, but realized that he looked a little too different from the original Mega Man, so he made Zero the secondary main character.
Well, his wish came true with this installment on the Game Boy Advance. Zero is the main protagonist and has quite a redesign.
Canonically speaking, the characters look the exact same as they do in-universe, and Capcom has gone on record saying that the only reason they look different is because they changed artists. This style does seem to fit a swordsman more than the original does, however. This design is much more agile looking and not nearly as bulky.
But we're not here to just critique the art style, let's talk about the story and the gameplay.
As we said earlier, 100 years have passed, and since this was originally supposed to come out after X5, we understand that Zero has been dead, or at the very least missing, for that entire time.
The game opens with a group of Resistance soldiers running away from some robots that bear a striking resemblance to X. They find themselves cornered, and after the last soldier, Milan, is gunned down, Seal, the scientist they were protecting, uses her cyber elf to reawaken Zero.
What's a cyber elf?
To put it simply, computer programs that can affect the material world.
So, kind of like Cortana from Halo?
Yeah, except they die after they use their powers.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's depressing.
And that's just the start of it. The Zero series, for lack of a better term, post-apocalyptic or dystopian setting inspires feelings of loneliness and despair, but also the motivation to fight back to make life better for Reploids everywhere.
We're told that the one spearheading this attack on the Resistance is a Reploid called Master X. Apparently, over the last century, X fell off the wagon and started going to any extreme to protect humanity.
iRobot anyone?
So, after Zero wakes back up, he has hibernation sickness.
Oh, so he's blind?
No, he has amnesia.
They couldn't get that reference right?
Star Wars homages aside, Zero agrees to join the Resistance because they believe him to be some great hero, and he really doesn't have much else better to do.
Now, let's get down to gameplay mechanics. It definitely feels like an evolved version of the Mega Man X engine that was made specifically for Zero. The combat is fast-paced and super fun.
You control 2 weapons at once, even though most games give Zero a total of 4 different weapons to use. The Z-Saber, the Z-Buster, the Shield Boomerang, and the game's unique weapon. The Triple Rod for Zero-1, the Chain Rod for Zero-2, the Recoil Rods for Zero-3. By the 4th game, the shield and rods were scrapped entirely for the Z-Knuckle, which let Zero steal the weapons of certain enemies, thus bringing back the weapon copy mechanic.
However, with these weapons, that also means no more special weapons from bosses. However, depending on which boss is defeated, you can get an elemental chip to change the attributes of your charge shots and the X skills. So in a way, Zero still has his old techniques, you just have to unlock them.
The Zero series is great for both casual gamers and hardcore gamers. Casual in that just completing the game itself is fun, and hardcore because 100%ing any of these games is a challenge, especially 0, 2, and 3.
Another interesting thing is that in the first game, the mission select and layout is completely different from any other Mega Man game. You don't pick based on a character icon, you select from a list, so you're going in blind, which adds to the challenge. In addition, you don't have to complete most of the missions. It's better if you do because you need the power-ups, but you can choose not to if they're too difficult.
When you reach the end of the game, you find out that Master X is actually a copy of the original X, and the real X no longer has a physical body and he's just been reduced down to a cyber elf.
Which brings us to another interesting plot point. Originally, X was intended to be the antagonist being driven to several extremes after over a century of fighting Mavericks, all for the sake of protecting humanity.
Kinda glad they kept the real X a good guy because that makes the ending to Zero-3 more satisfying. X and Zero fighting side by side one last time.
Some of the coolest characters are the 4 guardians of Master X: Sage Harpuya, Fighting Fafnir, Fairy Leviathan, and Hidden Phantom. Each of them was created using traces of X's DNA.
There are a lot of unexpected developments throughout the games, such as finding out that X wasn't the real enemy, and the fact that Zero is using a copy of his old body.
At some point, Zero's mind was taken out of his body and put into a copy, and his original body was given to a Reploid named Omega. He's the final boss of Zero-3.
And then we have Zero-4. Truth be told, this game just felt a little bit tacked on. The creator of Omega, Dr. Vile,
not to be confused with Dr. Wily,
managed to escape after the events of Zero-3 and came back in Zero-4. But besides that, the rest of the game just isn't quite as fulfilling as the other games in terms of story.
Zero One has Zero fighting a clone of his best friend. Zero Two has us dealing with conflicting ideology and betrayals. Zero Three pits us against the most powerful Reploids and Cyber Elves ever, and with Zero having to destroy his old body, it drives home the existential conflict from the X series, in which Zero struggles with his origins, having been created by Dr. Wily to destroy, but choosing to save the world.
With Zero literally severing his ties to Dr. Wily by destroying his old body, ending his 2-century-old nightmare, it's rather poetic in showing that he's choosing the path of a hero. So it's not that Zero 4 was bad, it's just that you can't really top something with that much weight behind it.
To make matters worse, it's implied that he dies at the end of Zero 4, since the last scene shows fragments of Zero's helmet on the ground.
Yeah, definitely unnecessary.
But believe it or not, the story doesn't end there. Hundreds of years later, the Mega Man ZX series begins.
This game uses an updated Mega Man Zero engine with the same controls, with several new features, like being able to play as a girl.
Her name is Ale, while the male character is Venom. At this point in time, a new technology known as the biometals has been created. Certain beings confuse with biometal and transform, gaining its powers. These people are called the Mega Men.
So we've gone from Astro Boy with copy abilities to Mega Man Star Wars and now to Mega Man Power Rangers.
Yes. The various biometals are based on characters in the Zero series, each one carrying the powers of different Reploids, giving the powers of X, Zero, and the Four Guardians.
And in the sequel, Axel's biometal is added to the mix.
The biometals were created from the DNA of the Reploids they were based on, so even though they may be dead, they live on through their new heroes.
In ZX Advent, you play as Gray or Ash, and as we said, you get biometal A.
Interesting thing about the boss battles, you get fragments of the biometal from the main 8 bosses, and depending on where you hit them, the fragments will not be as badly damaged, so it makes upgrading your various forms easier. Plus it adds to the challenge.
They even bring in biometals based on Dr. Vile and Omega, and one based on an 8-bit sprite for the minigames.
Whew. It has been a long journey, but that brings us to the end of a very long storyline, and a saga spanning 300 years of Robot Wars?
At least. But we're not done yet. You remember how we mentioned other Mega Man RPG games back during the X video? Yeah, we're about to get into those next. Tune in next time for arguably the most popular Mega Man series of our time, Mega Man Battle Network.